All right, back to the Firewall. Let's see how far we can get on this thing. To start, disassembly, deburring, as always, and a lot of dimpling countersinking. Once that's done, we will get into the primer. Again, we're using that new white primer. I'm excited to get a little more experience with that. And once that's cured, all this goes back together and we start riveting. Let's do it. I got the Firewall deburred just fine. It is steel, so a couple extra twists and a little extra pressure with that tool are necessary. And then from there, it's dimpling. Now, I'm really happy I took some time in between the wings and the fuselage to rebuild my dimpling bench. The added structure helps support some of the heavier pieces, which with a steel Firewall is really necessary. And then one of the things that I did on my original one, not knowing, is I put some legs out front, but the dimpler itself is designed to hang over a bench so that you can get into parts that are folded, like trailing and leading edges. And so often those two front legs were just dangling off the edge of the table. So the new model, mainly supported from the back with an angled cut, allowing the front to kind of hang over along with the dimpler. It works wonders. I'm so happy I took some time to do that. Once dimpled, it's all countersinking. So I got my two countersink tools set up, the number 40 and the number 30. They're set for flush rivet depth, then 7 clicks deeper, and that's going to be perfect for nesting into the dimpled Firewall. And so running the dimples, being careful that you're getting the dimple on the correct side of the part, all through the stiffeners, all through the doublers. And that's going to get everything right up to the point of deburring. So the heat gun trick works pretty well for getting these decals off. The heat gun trick is simply hit it with a heat gun until, I like to do it, until the heat activated paper turns the whole thing black, and then peel it off. It gets the decal, the part label off much easier than trying to pick at it and have it come off in a billion pieces. These came out really cool. These are nice looking parts, and I'm proud of them. Shooting the primer, I'm getting used to the stuff. I like it. I like how it comes out of the gun. I like how it applies. The drying time is going to be an issue, I can already tell. It has the potential to really log jam me in the primer booth. That's okay. I think with the fuselage, there's enough stuff that you can bounce around on. Hopefully, I'm not really ever waiting on parts to dry. The wait is long. The dry time is it's longer than I would like, but the finish is excellent. It's exactly what I want the interior of my plane to look like. I took a little extra care on those pieces that I was so proud of fabricating, making sure that they got a nice coat, 2 coats, and they came out just wonderful. It looks amazing. So I'll take the hit on having to slow down at points, and it'll definitely try my patience, but I really, really, really like the finish. Now it's just rivet everything together. The instructions make it sound pretty easy, but I have a feeling it's going to take me a little while. Let's get started. So when I started the firewall riveting, I was all about back riveting. Even though I had read somewhere that it's much easier to buck them, I was like, nah, forget it. Boost up the back rivet plate, let's get it going. After about a dozen rivets, half of those having to be drilled out, and gave up on back riveting. I don't know why, it's just difficult, and the rivets have a tendency to sit high. Once I started traditional bucking rivets, they sit flush on the firewall side. They look great on the other side. There's a couple angles that are hard to get to, but for the most part, just buck those rivets, man. Start with your 4s. They're a little bit difficult, but once you get in a rhythm, you bust through them. And then when you get to the 3s, it's just easy. It's a great way to finish up. Make sure you do whatever you have to do to remember not to set any rivets around the recess. This is why I always use the blue tape when I don't want to rivet something. I just caught myself having already set the top line of rivets where the recess goes. Those are all supposed to be left out until you rivet in the recess. So I had to drill out some rivets, but we're gonna keep plugging away. The very last thing on the firewall for now is drilling 2 holes for the motor mount. Now there's already an existing hole in the bracket up front, and there's an existing hole in the firewall on the back. We're just trying to connect those two. And if you don't hit it exactly perpendicular, you're not going to come through on that hole on the firewall. Perfect. You may be asking, what about that auxiliary fire pump doubler? The piece that I couldn't find because I have to make it. Well, I was never too worried about that. And the reason is, I don't think I'm gonna mount my auxiliary fuel pump to the firewall. There's quite a few very popular ones that get mounted between the left and right seat in the center console next to the fuel selector switch. In fact, I've sort of always known that that's where mine is going to live. So for now, no doubler on the firewall. Well, I got the place cleaned up a little bit, and that didn't take long. What has taken a while is studying these parts. These are incredibly machined and likely very expensive pieces. So I'm taking some time to get myself acquainted with the parts, the instructions, and the upcoming steps. So Center 04 is like at the heart of it all. It's where the spar meets the cockpit. It's the former that joins basically everything that is the fuselage to everything that is the wings. It utilizes some of the cool gold anodized parts that came with the wing that I've been holding on to. We get to unwrap those and figure out how to put it all together. The first step is to final drill some holes to size for snap bushings. Now, looking at it, I noticed that some are already drilled for you, but they're drilled larger than what they tell you to drill. It might be that vans realize these holes need to be bigger, and it was easier for them just to drill them bigger themselves than it was to alter the plans and the instructions. I don't know. We're gonna get the rest drilled. I'm gonna fit in the snap bushings. We're gonna move forward. Those to me were kind of the practice pieces, if you will. This next piece makes me incredibly nervous. The holes are in. That step drill makes quick work of those. I love that thing. The only thing is one of the 704 pieces sort of overlaps one of the holes I just drilled. And I don't know if I'm gonna have to scallop that edge in or not. I'm not sure. The instructions do mention you're gonna have to trim that bushing, but this is more than just trimming a bushing. So bolting on the sides to the center spars, you want to put through one of those close tolerance bolts in order to align those pieces, and those are very aptly named. It's a snug fit. Once you get that in, it's all about these spar bars, and we have to align those themselves with some bolts, clamp them on, and then drill a hole through there as perpendicular as we can for some rivets. So now it's time to bolt up the control column mounts. It looks pretty straightforward, but I think the labels got swapped on my mounts. Took me a while to do some research and see if in fact I have a left label on a right mount and vice versa. Once I got that straightened out, it's just drilling and bolting. I'm stuck staring at this thing, wondering if I want to remove the hatch portion for optional weight savings. I just don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze. It seems like a lot of work and maybe an ounce of weight, not sure. I guess I'll go ahead and do it. I kind of think of it as like extra credit, so I've always done the extra credit. Let's go ahead and remove it. Was it worth it? I don't know. I should have done it before and after. Instead I did them both at the same time. But I went ahead and I weighed the parts that I cut off. We're just over an ounce, so let's round up for all the lost shavings and filings and whatnot. We'll call it 2 ounces. If that's not good for a couple hundred of feet per minute of climb, I don't know what is. I will note they do look a little cooler, so there's that. So I have here the control stick assembly, which is pretty freaking cool. This took a little work to get bolted together. It's just like other pieces of linkage where you have brass bushings that you want just barely longer than the steel sleeve that's attached to the weldment. And everything is just a little bit too long to fit. So I spent about an hour grinding and filing until we get some friction-free movement. And then this is going to get bolted to those brackets I just made. And really the only thing I'm trying to do is mock it up to figure out how many washers on either side of those bearings I need. Because then everything's got to be disassembled because I want these primed. So there's no play in this thing back and forth. It moves freely. And the control column pieces will fit in that, and those will get bolted on, and those move freely. So this whole little endeavor was really just trial fitting all of this. Next up, it's something that I have a lot of experience doing. We need some nut plates and flanges. Hopefully this is a walk in the park. We have to drill some nut plates and their attachment holes onto these stiffeners. We want to use that same line. This time I've just clecoed those nut plates there. We'll match drill with those as a guide. That way when we flip them around, everything's lining up. Ta-da. So let's talk primer for a moment. The white primer I love. It's great. It looks fantastic. It's durable. I think it's going to be excellent on the interior of the plane. However, the dry time is an issue. And at first, I thought to myself, well, the entirety of the fuselage will just be primed in white. That way I'm not trying to figure out what's going to be visible and what's not, and what I have to mask if something extends from a white area to a green area. Just paint it all white. However, that dry time is hanging over my head. For example, with multifaceted pieces like this that I'm going to have to shoot from numerous angles and give 2 coats, that means 2 more days before I can rivet anything related to these pieces or the other pieces I'm working on. And I don't want to do that. So I have decided that I'll still utilize some of the AXO primer when pieces won't be visible. For example, these. It's doing exactly what I didn't want to do, which is going through plans and trying to figure out if something's going to be able to be seen from the future. But I think it's all I can really do if I want to keep this build moving along and don't want to be frustrated and wind up rushing primered pieces. It may mean that some pieces are even white on one side and green on the other. I don't really know exactly how it's going to play out as we move forward. I do know this. These won't be seen, and today they're going to be green. First up, we're going to put nut plates on these reinforcement ribs. Now, Vans calls for a 4.5, far too long. I'm going with 3.5. Now, with that piece clecoed here onto the spar as a guide, we'll countersink the forward-facing holes. That piece is acting as a guide for the pilot here. Now, while you're all set up to do it, you might as well get the nut plates on your ribs here as well. So the web stiffener gets riveted to the back side of the forward 704 bulkhead with flush rivets that face forward. Flush heads go on the forward side. They're on the forward side so that the cover brace can then be attached over those flush rivets with number 8 screws. Once that's all together, you can move to the inner cover braces. Those are attached with universal head rivets, and it's pretty straightforward. Now that those pieces are on, I'm going to attach the former sides to the bulkhead, and this entire contraption can then be bolted together to take a look at it, and then we'll set it aside. I didn't do a great job of knowing this in the video, but keep in mind one thing. There are 2 pieces that look incredibly similar. The forward 704 bulkhead and the aft 704 bulkhead. I'm working on the forward, where these hatch covers are attached. On the aft side is where the control column mounts were attached. Later, we'll also attach those gold anodized spacer blocks to the aft 704 bulkhead. So the last rivets to buck on these were these long sons of guns that they're over 1 inch long, and they're there to hold on the spacers. They're countersunk on the forward end, or I should say the rivets are flush on the forward side The spacers are countersunk, and these big rivets go all the way through the spacers, and then you put the shop head on the back side of the bulkhead. That shop head doesn't get fully formed. There's so much room within that hole for that rivet to compress that you don't get a full shop head, at least not according to any rivet gauge I've ever seen. Now, I looked it up. That's normal. It's something to be expected with this part. Alright, so a couple episodes I droned on and on about some aluminum tubing, and we had various lengths, and there was one particular length that we had to use to cut spacers for the ailerons. The others were to be used elsewhere in the plane. We're going to use some of it now. These are pre-cut spacers that hopefully you didn't use on your ailerons. They're going to be utilized as spacers between the fore and aft 704 bulkhead. And that's it. I'd like to say it's done. It's done for now, like everything else in this plane. We'll come back to it, I'm sure. I gotta get this place cleaned up, so we're gonna call this one for now. But join me next time. I got tons more bulkheads to make. In the meantime, thank you for liking, thank you for subscribing, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. We'll see you next time on Ryan Flies.